Hi, this is Megan with Beadaholique, and today I'm going to show you how to do Dragonscale chainmail. And this is a bracelet that I made using the Dragonscale weave. You can see it's got a really nice thickness to it, and it does look a lot like scales. Now, all you'll need to do this is 2 different chainmail ring sizes and 2 pairs of pliers. As far as the different sizes go, I'm actually just using the sizes that are recommended for this weave on the back of the Artistic Wire chainmail ring package. But some rules of thumb if you're going to choose your own ring sizes is that the smaller ring needs to be able to fit inside the larger ring if you lay it flat like that, and that the inner diameter, so the inside measurement of the smaller ring, needs to be at least 3 times the thickness of the wire gauge of the larger, so that you need to be able to fit 3 rings of the big one inside the small one. And I noticed that when I used a smaller wire gauge for the smaller ring, it went together easier than when I tried to do it with 2 different sizes of the same gauge. So I'm using my larger rings are an 18 gauge ring with an inner diameter of 15/64 of an inch, and my smaller rings are a 20 gauge with an inner diameter of 9/64 of an inch. So when you begin the Dragonscale, you're going to establish the width of your piece, and then you're going to work down the length, and you'll need to have some of your smaller rings open and some of your larger rings closed. And I'm going to do like this one. I started this one with 4 large rings and 3 small rings across. So I'm going to do the same for showing you how to do the weave. And the chainmail rings come slightly open, so you'll need to either open them or close them all the way. Then you're just going to make a little chain of large, small, large, small. You can put 2 large rings on a small ring and close it up. And then put those and another large ring on another small ring. Close that. And once more. Okay. And I'm using contrasting colors to kind of show you the difference. In this piece I used brass inside and silver outside. You can see it looks kind of cool when you use a different color for the inside than for the outside. So I'm using the black for this so you can see really what's going on. What we're gonna do next is you're gonna want about, I think, 3 more closed rings. Okay, the next step is going to be to anchor these closed rings onto your row of smaller rings. And you're going to put 1 over each, but it's of course easier to work with them one at a time so they don't fly everywhere. So go ahead and pick that up and hold it steady. You're just going to take the ring and capture the smaller ring, or I'm sorry, go through the smaller ring and it will capture that loose ring in place. Close that up. And that's the first one. And then you're going to add another loose large ring over the next small ring. And this time we're going to capture both of these rings by going through the smaller rings and holding them in place. So you're going to go through that smaller ring and the next one, which is going to hold both of those loose rings in place. As with any chainmail, this can seem really daunting at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. And if you are having a really hard time with this one, try using larger rings. I'm using pretty big ones, so if you're trying to do this with a smaller size and it's giving you trouble, you might want to use a bigger size. And we're going to put one more closed ring over that last small ring, and we're going to go through the middle small ring and that last one. Okay. And then you're going to go ahead and finish the row by putting one more large ring into the small ring. You can see that there's 2 coming out of each one, so we need to finish that one off. And your rows will alternate between 3 and 4 rings. So you start with a row of 4. Your next row, if you look, they're kind of stacked diagonally like this. You have a row of 4, a row of 3, and a row of 4. And if you can see the way that your rings do stack diagonally, your large ones will stack to one side and the small ones will stack to the other side. It kind of has like a crisscross pattern on the edge. So that's the way you're going to work. You're going to keep it stacked kind of, towards you as it comes forward. Okay, so to complete this, the next step, we're going to put a small ring inside of each of the large rings on the last row that we added, and they're going to continue to step down. So each time you put in a new row of rings, they need to be below the ones above it. So this new row of the small black rings is going to sit right underneath those 3 that are in there. And you're going to take the ring and you're going to go through the top ring, and you're going to capture the large ring from the row before. And as we take these rings through here, you're going to go through the top, make sure it's, again, to the right of those other small rings that were in there, and you're going to go through both of the rings before, and you want that to be inside this ring here. So that, let me go ahead and close it and I can show you. And if it moves around and gets above the ring next to it, you want to make sure that you fix that. So you want it to go around the 2 in the middle row and coming out right in the middle of that one there, but you also want it to go through the one from before on the first row. You can move them and get them in the right place afterwards, but it is hard, so it's important to try to get them in the right position in the first place. So again, take the small ring and you're going to go down around the 2 rings in the middle, with the back of the ring going through the 1 2 rows behind. And then 1 more ring on that last ring from the row before. When you lay this out, you can see your new row of the smaller rings sitting right inside the row of the larger rings. And you're going to continue working in rows of 3, 4, 3, 4 rings, and you'll always put the large ring in and then put small rings in each of the large rings. And the way you start a row from here out is a little easier. You're going to take a large ring and you're going to grab just the small ring coming up through the opening. And you're going to put a large ring through each of the small rings from before. You're just going to grab and grab, and don't forget, you have the rings, the small rings from before coming up through there. You don't want to grab those, you just want the ones from the last row that you put in. And this row will have 3 large rings. So now you have 3 large rings in your last row, and you're going to go back in and put small rings inside each one. And just like before, we're going to go down through the large ring, around the 2 large rings from before, just underneath. And we're going to go and put those in. And again, you want to make sure that your new small rings are sitting underneath the ones from before. Down through the top and around the 2 from the last row. Just 1 more for this row, because we only had 3 large rings. And you can start to see the sides of the scales forming. And so that's the end of that row. The next row will have 4 large rings, which you just put right into the last row of small rings, just like you did before. And you'll put a ring on each end that will hang kind of loose. That's how we go back to 4 from 3. Okay, and then, just like before, what we're gonna do is take each one of the large rings from the last row and put a black small ring inside, exactly the same way. And again, on the last ones here, there's just gonna be the one loop from the row before to go around. This is a little bit painstaking, but when you get going, you'll find a groove and it goes a little bit faster than it seems like it would. Through the top, around the two from the last row. And through the top, around the two from the last row. This particular weave is a little bit more difficult in execution than in theory. So sometimes it can just be hard to get your pliers in where they're supposed to go. And one more through the top. And on the end, it's going to go just around that last one. And you're going to continue just like that. Again, you always want to make sure it's below the row before. And you're going to continue in that way until it's as long as you like. I'm going to do one more row of 3, and then I'm going to show you how to taper the end, like I did on the ends of this bracelet, so that it can be easier to attach your findings to. You want to start your taper with a row of 3. So I'm going to go ahead and put another row in by putting the large ring through the last small rings. And tapering off the end will also keep these last couple of rings from flopping around. It keeps it nice and sleek. Okay, so you know that your row is going to have 3 large rings, and then you're going to put 3 small rings inside, one for each. Through the top, around the last 2, and close it. Down through the last ring, go through the 2 from the row before, and one more for this row. And then to taper for the end, you're going to continue this decrease. So you went from 4 to 3. Instead of going back to 4, we're going to go from 3 to 2. So just like when you go from 4 to 3, you're just going to put rings through the middle where you have 2 of the smaller rings on each side. And then you're going to put the smaller ring inside each of the 2 large rings. Down through the top and around the last 2. And one more for that row. Okay, and then just like we went 4, 3, 2, in the next row we're going to put just 1 of the large rings. And then we need just 1 of the small rings to go inside there. Through the top and around those last 2 rings. And that's going to be how you taper it off to get that nice finished look. And then all you do to do the other side is flip your work over, and you can see your work flipped over looks exactly like it did in the other way. You're going to taper it off on this side just the same. If any of your inside rings are not in here, if they're sitting up above, you can just take your pliers and pop them in where they need to go. When it's done correctly, it should all look very uniform from both sides. You can see sometimes the end pieces get popped up, the inside rings, you can just move them back down. It should be very fluid when it's done correctly, and there shouldn't be any rings that look out of place. That's how you do Dragonscale chainmail.